If you want to improve your accent, these are things you need to do right now. You have to actively listen to native speakers. Now, I know a lot of you have been told you need to listen to native speakers. I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to say you have to actively listen. So what does that mean? Actively listen. That means you're really paying attention. You're really listening for certain sounds, pronunciation, rhythm, intonation. So you're really paying close attention to figure out how exactly a native says something, maybe versus the way you say it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's real life, right? Real life pronunciation, the intonation, and the rhythm of it. You got to listen to it. And, like listen to a lot of things like podcasts, YouTube channels, maybe Netflix and things like that. You pick up like natural phrasings and emphasis on the things of how they talk. I mean, it's very important. It also sharpens your listening too, by
Yeah.
listening to, native speakers, right? The sounds, how their
Yes,
speech just comes more smoother, right? Like, for example,
absolutely.
connections. If you say, "Hey, I don't know," and you say, "Hey, I don't know," it said, "I don't know" versus "I don't know," right? So, yeah,
Right.
things like that.
and
Hmm.
and you'll pick up on this if you're actively listening, which means you're not doing something else. Now,
Hmm.
there's a time when you don't need to actively listen, where you're just maybe making lunch, you're at the gym or whatever, and you just have a podcast playing in the background. That's also great. But the distinction between that and active listening is that active listening, you're actually paying attention, and you're going to maybe mimic what native speakers are saying and the way
Hmm.
they say it.
Yeah,
Um,
imitating like famous movie stars, movie lines, songs like
yes,
when you're listening to music.
yeah,
That's a great thing, especially with the rhythm, pronunciation, and all of that. The intonation of it. Music is a great tool for, basically the rhythm, the intonation, the high and the low. I think it's great. Yeah, the pronunciation. Yeah.
and that takes us to number two. You mentioned pronunciation. This is what you definitely need to do. You need to practice pronunciation of individual sounds. So, for example, certain sounds like the TH sound in English can be very difficult for learners. So, you want to practice these. You want to work on these sounds individually. So, you want to make sure that you can say the TH sound. So, words like whether, bother, either, these TH sounds can be difficult for some people. You need to figure out which sounds are difficult for you, and you need to practice those sounds by saying those words over and over. And what kind of tools, what kind of uh, guides do you think people can use to improve their pronunciation, Leon?
I mean, for me, great for the TH is, like reading or pronouncing the ordinal numbers, right? The fourth, the fifth,
Oh,
the
yeah,
sixth, because everything is all TH, right? So
yeah.
the more you pronounce that ordinal numbers, that's perfect for your TH in that pronunciation. As far as the pronunciation, like you mentioned, an app, a tool, if you were to get something there, I believe ELSA is a great tool for pronunciation. They focus
Mhm.
on that.
We'll get into some apps that we'll recommend later, but yeah, you might want to use some apps and to make sure that you're pronouncing words correctly, because a lot of people don't realize this, but if you're not pronouncing a word correctly, you're going to keep saying it over and over incorrectly, and all you're
Hmm.
doing is you're reinforcing the error, which will ultimately make it very difficult or maybe impossible for you to undo the error. So just be very careful when it comes to pronunciation. Something you need to do right now whenever you learn new words, make 100% sure that you're pronouncing that new word correctly. Because if you're not, it's going to take a lot of work to undo the error. So if you get it right from the beginning, it'll save you a lot of time down the road.
Hmm. And another thing that you can do is like maybe tongue twisters, kind of like short rhymes or
You guys
things like
can
that.
Google
Yeah.
tongue twisters in English,
Hmm.
yes, and practice saying them.
Hmm.
Um, What's good for those tongue twisters, that's a very good point, Leon, is that tongue twisters are really good because they help you sort of get your tongue to do things that will
Hmm.
ultimately help you when you pronounce words. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of tongue twisters are difficult for Americans as well, natives as well. The
Hmm.
point is not that you can say the tongue twisters perfectly. It's more of an exercise. It's kind of like when you go to the gym, you lift weights, and you lift maybe lighter weights because you want to strengthen your tendons so that ultimately you can lift heavier weights. That's kind of what you're doing when you practice saying
Hmm.
tongue twister. So it's not important to necessarily get the tongue twister perfect, but what you're doing is you're just really exercising and preparing your tongue to do certain movements that will
Yes.
enable you to pronounce words easier down the road.
Hmm.
And how do you even know that you're speaking correctly? Well, that takes us to our next tip, and that is you should record yourself. I think it's very important to record yourself because what happens is we oftentimes think that um, we're saying something correctly, properly. In our head, it sounds really amazing. Has that ever happened to you where you think in your head, you've pronounced it in your head and you think, oh, I can do this. But then when your mouth opens, it's not so great, right? So
Right.
record yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, when you record yourself, you critique yourself, find out what are the
Yeah.
words that you feel that it's incorrect or you don't like it or you're not unsure. And if you're unsure, go Google it, see how the correct pronunciation of that word. So yeah, definitely record yourself. When you're reading yourself, when you're reading a passage or a book, read it out loud. Compare it to a native speaker, like when you record yourself, and then after that, record it and compare it to a native speaker to see how is the pronunciation. Is it pretty similar? Is it
Yeah.
close? The
Hmm.
intonation, the ups and downs, kind of compare that. Does it sound natural? Is
Yes.
there a rise and fall? And yeah, basically if it sounds natural, yeah.
Absolutely. So you won't know this. You won't
Hmm.
know this unless you record yourself. So go ahead and record yourself. And look, nobody's going to be listening to it. So if you feel a little bit embarrassed or shy about it, you just have to know that this is for you only. This is for you only, and it'll really help you. And when you listen to yourself, just pay attention to your intonation and your stress and your pronunciation, and you'll see over time you're recording yourself today, 6 months later, you listen to that same recording. Ideally, you're going to hear the difference. And you won't know if you've improved if you don't record yourself. So record yourself. You got to do this if you want to improve your accent. And this is, you got to do shadowing. You got to do shadowing exercises. So, Leon, do you want to explain to people what is shadowing?
Shadowing, it basically helps you improve based on your speech uh, rhythm. Is basically it's like a parrot you want to copy, right? A
Yes,
parrot.
yes.
So basically you're mimicking. That's what shadowing is about. You're mimicking something exactly the way they're speaking, the tone, the speaker's tone,
Yeah,
the rise, then fall, the intonation. So you're gonna exactly pronounce it exactly how that person pronounces it. Again, the intonation, the rise, the fall, that kind of thing. So that's what the shadowing is about. Basically, is a mimicking. Yeah.
right. And you should do shadowing with podcasts, with
Hmm.
movies, with TV shows where somebody says something, a native. Obviously, only you're going to only use materials by natives. And however they just said the sentence, you're going to try to say it exactly the same way. And if you do this enough, it'll really help you improve your accent. So try that. And mix that with the other tip that we gave you, which is to record yourself. So while you're shadowing, record yourself and then you can play it back and compare it with how the person said it in the video, in the movie, in the TV show.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like a technique that helps you kind of master the flow of the English language, right? You can use from pauses to intonation. I'd say, why don't you probably watch the news reporters, right? You want to watch what's going on. So go ahead and copy and shadow those news reporters, more of a professional tone and kind of in the flow too. So you're learning at the same time what's going on, the current event, and then at the same time, you're practicing the English language, maybe like I said earlier about maybe characters of your favorite, maybe movie character, sitcom, something casual, everyday tone. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And you mentioned tone. That takes us to our next tip, which is you should practice your intonation and your rhythm. And what do we mean by this? Well, English has a specific rhythm and intonation pattern, which means when you say a sentence, you don't just go flat, right? You don't say, I am going to take a walk. That sounds like a robot. Nobody speaks like
Hmm.
that. We say, I'm going to take a walk. Do, 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 right? It goes
Hmm.
up and down and up and down.
Hmm.
It's like hills and valleys, right? And so
Hmm.
you want to learn when to intone up. You want to know when to drop. You want to know when to do.
Hmm.
And when you do that, you can be more expressive. But the way to do that is to practice listening to how natives say a sentence like, uh, you know, to understand the mood. What is the reason they're saying it? What is the real meaning behind the words? Because if you understand that, then you'll understand why they have a rising tone or why they have a dropping tone.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, with the tone, the intonation, it kind of gives life to your speech, right? When you're speaking, it's kind of
Yeah.
like helping you convey your emotions and your meaning. It takes a whole new effect in it, right? So,
Yeah.
you can emphasize like what, Ben is ma mentioning, like depends on a certain sentence. Like, let's say, that's really interesting versus, wow, that's really interesting, or, ooh, that's
Yes.
really interesting, kind of the rise, the fall, that kind of thing. You want to put
Yes.
life into what you speak and how you say things.
And I just want to take that sentence you gave as an example, Leon, which is if you
Hmm.
were to say, like Leon said, that's interesting, that means that's just a statement. Leon just identified something that is interesting. That's interesting. Okay. But
Hmm.
if I were to stress the word that, if I were to say that's interesting, if I were to okay, the difference, okay, let's try
Hmm.
this. That's interesting. That just simply is a statement. If I were to say
Yeah.
that's interesting, if I were to say that's interesting, what I'm actually saying is, are you sure that particular thing is interesting, which means what I'm saying is I don't really believe what you're saying. I don't believe that thing is interesting. Just by rising in my tone, right? Just by going
Hmm.
that's interesting, right? So
Hmm.
you guys have to learn, how intonation and rhythm really changes the meaning of a sentence. And that comes from
Hmm.
listening.
Hmm.
Yes, because if you don't get the intonation right, or if you don't if you don't include intonation and rhythm into your words, then all you are saying are words, but yet at the same time, those words don't really convey what you want them to convey. So it's very important to get the right intonation and rhythm. So pay attention to that just by listening to how natives speak. I think really every language does this. Every language
Yeah.
has intonation. It's very important to get that right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And lastly, I'm going to say that the last tip here, you guys need to be patient, but also consistent. So you got to tell yourself, okay, it's going to take a while, but at the same time, you can't tell yourself it's going to take a while. So if I skip a day, if I skip a few days, it'll be fine. No, you have to both be consistent. Excuse me, you have to be both patient and consistent. So be patient, know that it's going to take a while, but at the same time, you have to consistently practice. You have to consistently execute and do those tips. Practice doing the things that we just told you, right?
Hmm. Yeah, improving takes time, right? As Ben was mentioning. I mean, consistency is very important because that's key to retaining the new skills, the consistency, right? And then the discipline. I think discipline is very important. If you go to a gym and you have the consistency and the discipline, it gives you the results. And that's basically how the English language works, or any language that you're learning. If you have the consistency and the discipline, it'll give you results. Of course, if you throw in the desire and the passion, that's even better, right? It kind of motivates you even more. Yeah.
Yeah,
Determination.
absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe set up a routine of practicing, maybe
Oh,
like
yes.
10, 15 minutes, daily, if it allows you, or even more, to get kind of a steady improvement. Building a strong foundation, and like in the pronunciation and the fluency, it's not going to happen overnight, right? As everybody knows, it's not like a miracle that's going to happen. So, maybe as we talked about, record yourself. So what you want to do is kind of record yourself, see the progress maybe every month, to see how you gradually improve in your improvement. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
How your
Oh, wait a
accent
minute.
or pronunciation accent changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and one last thing, we mentioned that we were going to tell you we're going to give you some apps or suggest some apps. We forgot to do that. So let's just quickly suggest some apps to people. Like I would
Hmm.
suggest there's one called ELSA. ELSA will help you with the pronunciation. What else?
Yeah,
Um,
ELSA is one. I
mhm.
don't know about, I'm not too familiar with apps. I really don't pay attention, or tell my students to, hey, use this. Yeah, you can use it in terms of as a practice and a study, but I really
Mhm.
don't focus on that, and I really don't give them my feedback. That's up to them. But I would say the only one that I really would recommend, highly recommend, is the ELSA, because that focuses on the pronunciation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's spelled ELSA, guys.
Hmm.
ELSA. There's also one called Speechling, and
Hmm.
also there's one called FluentU, as in Fluent
Hmm.
University. Maybe I don't know, it's university. I think it's actually U, as in you. So
Hmm.
FluentU, Speechling, and ELSA, and also the most basic. You can literally just go to Google Translate and type in a sentence and listen to the speech, the text to speech uh, thing that Google does, right? Have it speak to you. And
Mm-hmm.
while that's not perfect, it's not bad. In a pinch, you could do that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk to Siri, right?
sure,
Or
yeah,
Alexa. Yeah.
yeah, yes, any of those digital assistants, they are getting
Mm-hmm.
better with intonation. Those are
Mm-hmm.
those are not the best, but they're better than nothing. And
Yes.
but use a variety of resources, a variety of apps and tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, the best is going to be just listening to podcasts, TV shows, movies, of course, natives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that brings us to the end here. I think that what we'll do is we will have a second video where we talk about the don'ts, the things you should not do if you want to improve your accent, because I don't want this video to be too long. So we'll split it up into two. So join us in the next podcast for sort of a continuation of this one where we talk about the don'ts if you want to improve your accent.